of Surviving the Survivor, we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor. It is the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And since this is our OG story, had to bring back the professor and Tim Janssen just to kind of rehash what happened in court today, which was very quick, and what we're expecting in court in 2 weeks. I believe it is February 26th, if I have the date right. Probably at 2:30 p.m. if I have the time right. And there you go. Look at Mr. Pinto Peabody. That's a great name, Mr. Pinto Peabody. That might be the name of the pup because I see a woman in that picture. Thank you for becoming a member. Appreciate that. Please like, please subscribe. Our Patreon page. Carm just did an interview about her Holocaust story for a museum in Louisiana, of all places. And we're going to put that into Patreon. So back with us, of course, famed Tallahassee criminal defense attorney R. Timothy Janssen, the letter R-O-U-R, also a former federal prosecutor, hard to say quickly. And then you've got the Professor Joe Potuto, Professor Emerita at the University of Nebraska School of Law, who knows a lot about the law since she's a law professor. So Tim Janssen, I'm going to start with you. You were in court today. I mean, how long would you say that entire hearing lasted? There are 1 million people in that courtroom today, by the way, but how long was the Donna hearing, and how do you describe, I guess, the attitude, the appearance of Josh Zellman and Jackie Fulford? Are they looking confident? Are they looking worn out? Are they looking like they've been working on this case? What's your take?
Well, it was a regular calendar call, case management. So the judge had a bunch of cases going before it. It was surprising that there was quite a bit of media and some podcasters there in the front row thinking something. There was a photographer, and some of the cases went forward. And then when Donna's case got called up, the camera came in. I wouldn't say they looked any way confident or anything. I think they were just trudging along. I think they've got motions that they already have filed that they want to be heard. They're informing the court they have more motions they plan on filing. There's a dispute about some discovery and some depositions. And the court took that up briefly. This is not the time when you would take a long hearing and really collect evidence and make a ruling. This is where the judge just tries to keep the thing moving along. And so they have things that they've notified us they want done. They want to depose Pat Sanford. They want to depose Chris Corbett. They want to depose Robert Adelson. And the prosecution says they want 24 hours to depose those three people. So that's like 8 hours a person. That seems extreme. I doubt the judge will give them that much time. But they do have another motion to suppress that they haven't filed, that Josh has led to believe that it's complicated or complex. So I hope it's a little more filed with more clarity than the motion they filed these last two motions, because these motions weren't the strongest of motions. And they're really trying to get her out on bond, right? They're trying to get her out on bond. And there's a big benefit for a defendant being out on bond, right? You get more time with your client. You can eat healthier. You can get your hair done. You can dress and get better, and you get more time with your lawyers. So there is benefits getting her out, but I just don't think she's going to get out.
I would have to agree with that. I mean, Joe Potuto, of these two motions and what you heard Judge Everett say today, and we'll go back through it and kind of rehash it. By the way, STS Nation, as you see behind me, best guest, better community. So if you have questions for our two esteemed panelists, please, triple Qs. And there you go. Here's a triple Q for Tim, and I'll come right back to you, Joe. Tim, is this going to start timely? Meaning, do you still think this is going to begin on June 3rd of 2025, which is just several months away?
Well, you heard the judge's his position today was, you got 2.5 months. Whatever you're doing, whatever we need to do, whatever I need to do, this trial is going to go as scheduled. So move it, get it done, bring it to my attention, but we'll get it done.
And then I think it's going forward, and Judge Everett's taken no prisoners this time around. He's I wonder if Judge Everett, what do you guys think? Do you think he watches these podcasts? Not mine specifically, but do you think he's watching the podcast that
Joel, I will say I think he does, because we did that podcast on that motion for change of venue. And I brought to the attention, I said, well, why, if they were going to file this motion claiming prejudice, why did they file their motion and attach all the prejudice to the motion and not file it under seal?
Right.
And then the judge today said, well, make sure whatever you file under seal so you don't complain about the same thing you just filed. So I think he got it.
Yeah. He is one of the best. And I joke, but we see him occasionally at the Metro Deli, which is like the one sandwich shop that everyone goes to. And he's just like a super, if I may use the word, convivial, very nice guy. Haven't used that word since my SATs. But Joe Potuto, to you, by the way, very quick digression. In high school, I think I've mentioned this before. My dad, may he rest in peace. When I was middle school and high school, he would make me spend a half hour with him on the weekends, half hour, closed door, and we would read together like Herman Melville and Nathaniel Hawthorne. And you have no idea how embarrassing that is when you're in 7th or 8th grade, but it did teach me words like convivial, and I'm probably
I don't think either of those books had that word in them. As I recall, Hawthorne and Moby Dick,
you might be right.
Convivial was not.
There was other books, so I learned other words. But I think that the moral of that is, if my kids are listening, I'm going to torture you in the same way. So prepare yourselves. But anyway, Joe Potuto, to you, of these two motions, obviously the bond hearing one and the suppression one, to keep this call, the open mic call, so-called open mic call out, plus everything we heard today, what is sort of standing out to you from a legal perspective the most at this point?
Well, what I thought when I read them the first time, and that is, I don't think either of them is strong. I think both of them, particularly the bond motion, just throws everything in with no attempt to organize in a way that makes it completely coherent. I said earlier that I don't like the typos and the grammatical errors. I mean, I think people, when they're filing, should be careful about that kind of thing. Neither of them feels particularly strong to me. The motion to suppress is interesting because I don't think there's anything out there really on point. I don't think it's going to be a successful motion, but there's nothing out there that really is directly on point. And what they did in that motion was pull a lot of case law that doesn't, they can pull language that's kind of nice, but it doesn't really relate to the facts that are going on here. So that's if you think that's a nutshell, that was the nutshell.
There's the nutshell right there. So Tim, obviously we're looking at Donna here. She wasn't in court today, but it sounds from this, request for a bond hearing to get her out, it sounds like she's turning into an absolute mess in jail. And there were people, particularly, I think it was John Singer, who said, look, she's not going to last long in jail. And it does appear like it's starting to take a toll. Does this surprise you, with a 75-year-old inmate in the Leon County Jail, that she's claiming to have, this ear canal issue, hearing issues, other issues? Does any of this kind of surprise you?
Well, it's not surprising. As you get older, you have more medical issues, right? People are
not you, Tim.
No,
unless you're falling off a bike.
Well, if I was sitting in jail, I would have medical issues because, you're under stress. It is a stressful place. People are there. You got to watch yourself. People are trying to take advantage of her. People are trying to get money from her. And people, so she has to be careful. She's worried about her trial. She's away from her husband. Her son's got life in prison. Her other son wants to testify against her. Her daughter doesn't want to talk to her, and she can't see her grandbabies. So things are not good in the Adelson life, but that's not probably enough. I liken, getting a wiretap is really difficult to get, right? So it's one of the hardest things to get. So you got to show you've done everything you could possibly do in order for a judge to say you can impose someone's privacy. That's what I would do with Judge Everett in this case. You've got a first-degree murder case. You had an Arthur hearing. You're not going to let her out. I would require that the defense has to satisfy every possible alternative before I'm going to grant her bond, that they've tried everything to get her medical, everything, before I would grant the bond. And I would say, you need to satisfy all these things for me to even consider bond at this point. And I just don't think the motion did.
Yeah.
I don't either. There are the list of factors that are in the motion. I looked at them, and most of them, without even making any kind of argument at all, you can check off against her. The nature of the crime, the weight of the evidence, family ties. She don't have any family ties. One is, as we just said, one's in prison. One doesn't talk to her. One hasn't talked to her for years, and a husband who lives miles and miles and miles away. Past and present conduct, including a previous flight to avoid prosecution. I mean, that's check, 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 check. And then there's another one that says any other factors. And the fact that she was under an unaliving watch a couple of years ago, and there was at least quotes on at least one of the recordings that seemed as though she was thinking of unaliving herself. I mean, on the legal standard, it seems to me she doesn't have a prayer. And on the medical stuff, Joel, I was thinking about it. In prison or in jail, you don't have a lot to do. So if you do have a pain, in your arm, or you have breathing, you're gonna fixate on it. And I don't care whether you're 20 or 100. You're gonna spend a lot of time thinking about that little, you might have an ingrown toenail. You're gonna find a lot of time to worry about. Now, I don't want to minimize. I mean, she probably does have medical issues that are bothering her a lot, and the jail or a prison should do a reasonable job of taking care of those medical issues.
But by the way, the podcast helps me not think about my neck, even though that doesn't work. But look at this. Shout out to Melbourne, Australia. I watch every single show. You never mention Melbourne. I always mention Australia frequently. So from now on, it will be Melbourne, Australia, Sydney, Australia, the other places in Australia, Adelaide, the list goes on. But I love Australia. As a matter of fact, I love it so much that I've never been, but I would consider taking the 20-hour flight with my 3 kids, which means I would be a big commitment. And if we do, LG, I'll be sure to look you up in Melbourne. Tim Janssen, one of the questions here was, did Donna have to pay this legal team in full? Her and her husband, I think, have been accused and even taken to court over non-payment of some other attorneys. So what's the answer there? Did Josh Zellman say, wire me money or I ain't working on this case? Same with Fulford.
Well, if he's a smart lawyer, he'd have got paid up front or got a good retainer and billable. I don't know. I haven't talked to Josh about that. I know Alec was paid, I believe, a flat fee, and he was happy. He got paid. He's out.
Yeah. And let me ask you, what is a flat fee for this?
I mean, it's all different. Depends on the experience, how bad you want the case. Are you the lead lawyer? I know Dan was getting paid by the hour. He was getting an hourly fee on Donna's case. That's what I was told from a good source. So that can go really quick. I mean, you can jack that fee up. That's almost double or triple what a flat fee would be. You could say 750,000 flat fee. You could get into $1 million, $1.3 million, $1.4 million by the time you're doing billables.
Yeah. Well, good on Rashbaum for, I guess, going with the hourly rate. Tim, this is a you question. I think cooler by the lake. Do you think Donna, good point, is going to show up at the bond hearing in a wheelchair and play? I mean, this is like the Harvey Weinstein playbook, but it's a good point. And, I know you have to see Josh Zellman, who I'm sure is a fine attorney, and Jackie Fulford. But, would they go to this level if she doesn't really need a wheelchair to put her in a wheelchair? What do you think?
I hope that I don't think Jackie and Josh would go to that level. There was a PI lawyer in town who did put his client in a wheelchair, and then I saw him leave, and they were walking down the street together. So I've seen it before. I do not think Jackie or Josh will do that. I think they'll realize the backlash they'll get because, she hasn't claimed she can't walk or anything. She said she can't breathe, but I didn't notice any breathing problem today on the phone with her.
Yeah, and shout out to Susan here from True Lifestyles, who is just super kind and is always helping us out. But she sent me, she gets a lot of the inmate logs. Now I'm just going to read this real quick because I don't think we have a graphic for it. This is, from February 7th, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Susan. But at approximately 1400 hours this date, Director Dawson received a call from Miss Jackie Fulford in reference to Mrs. Adelson being unable to use the intercom in her cell to call the pod officer in the event she needed assistance. By the way, I had no idea they had an intercom. It's fancy. Mr. Dawson and I went to speak with Mrs. Adelson, and we physically showed her how to work the intercom in her cell, which was working correctly. Mrs. stated that she just needed a brief tutorial on how to use the intercom system, and she was able to use it at the completion of my demonstration. I asked Mrs. Adelson if there was anything else I could do, and she stated she was fine, did not need anything else. I left Mrs. Adelson sitting on her bunk doing crossword puzzles, and then continues a little bit. She was asked to clean her room and her sink out, and she advised the officer that she was tired and would try again with the oncoming morning officer. She was too tired, Tim. You cannot get a housekeeper, which I know she had on the outside, but can you get a housekeeper in jail, Tim? I guess if you extort another inmate, is that possible? But she was apparently too tired to clean.
You can get a housekeeper in jail, but you're going to have to provide either money, services, or canteen for doing that.
I mean, Tim, how messy can
it's a single
jail cell?
So listen, she had a lot of things in that annex. Witnesses and people tell me she had like 2 bins. Everybody else gets a bin. She had 2 of them because she was getting so many things, hoarding soap. So yeah, my concern now is she's in isolation, segregation. That means her door is shut and closed. That means that guard who's in that pod doesn't see her unless he walks around. So she's alone in her room by herself. My concern would be things go south, that she could harm herself in some way.
Yeah. No one wants that. But it's plausible.
No, but with her comments that she made earlier before,
you mean on the jail
concern you have, and if your trial's not going like you think it's going, those are concerns that the jail keeps in. They have to keep that up.
Does she have an iPod or something? I mean, she's calling Harvey every tablet. She's calling Harvey every day. And,
by the way, True Lifestyles broke that down too, and it's a lot of. She's spent a ridiculous amount of money in that canteen. By the way, before I forget, I'm putting that up. COE. Stefan Stearns, accused of killing Maddie Soto, the 13-year-old girl in Orlando, is supposed to be in court tomorrow, and trying to get information from some of these courts is a job in and of itself. But it's unclear, number one, if the hearing is still happening or if it is being streamed. And if anyone happens to know, survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com, I would love to know. But we're going to be doing a show on the latest either way tomorrow night. And one of the more disturbing things that's been in the news the last couple of days is 2 teachers at her school, at her middle school, have separately been arrested on child sex molestation assault charges. It's not clear. There's been no word that it's directly linked to Maddie, but she was literally swimming in a sea of predators what the hell is going on in Orlando? supposed to take my kids there for a trip in the end of March, and now I might have to cancel on everybody. I don't know yet, but so here is this defendant's motion to suppress. We're looking at it. Shout out to the COE for building this. Obviously, just showing you here. Point 2: one piece of evidence, Joe Potuto, that the state intends to use against Mrs. Adelson is a recording made after a jail call ended on November 7th, 2023. Incidentally, that's one day after Charlie's conviction. The call was originally made by Mrs. Adelson's son, Charlie, to Mrs. Adelson while he was incarcerated in the Leon County Detention Center. I mean, we talked about this earlier, but this call is incredibly damaging to her defense, right? If this is allowed in as evidence, and you talked about what the judge is going to say in terms of a guilty conscience, this could be game over. So, I mean, are they going to do everything they can, and what else can they do to try to suppress this call, Professor?
They're doing the motion. I don't know that there's anything more than they can do with regard to it. But you can get a conscience. You don't need this to get a consciousness of guilt instruction. And I think, and I'm trying to remember, I think there's a lot of other evidence that would go that she was trying to flee. This would be great because it's her own voice talking about it. But boy, you know, there are the records when she was dealing with what was it, the travel agent, about when she could go. There's the one-way ticket. She talked to other people about it. She asked some friend, as I recall, you know, about places where you wouldn't be extradited back. I think she was on the web looking for places where there was no extradition treaties. There's a whole lot of other stuff. This, though, would be really the sort of the cherry on the top of the sundae because it's her voice saying it. So, you know, but, you know, I looked at this. I looked again at the motion, Joel, and as I said, there's no law directly on point here. But one of the things that the defense lawyers talk about is that it's a warrantless search, and that technically that's true, but it's only technically true, because when you're talking about a warrantless search, you're talking about situations in which the police do not get a warrant before they do a search of a home, before they do a search of a car. They don't get an electronic surveillance order before they do a wiretap. This is not those cases. You have somebody in jail who has no reasonable expectation of privacy. There is no need to get a warrant to listen in on his phone call. So it is not in the world of where a warrant is required and now you're trying to talk about you didn't get a warrant. It's a very different circumstance. And then the second part of it that's so different is they had the authority at the outset. The call dropped and she kept talking, not realizing that she was still being recorded. That's also very different from the police continuing to listen in when they know you don't know and they know that they should have gotten consent. It's so different. And as I said earlier, you know, the Fourth Amendment protects your privacy rights in many circumstances, but it doesn't protect you from being negligent. It doesn't protect you from being stupid. That's on you. It's not on the government.
I would argue, if I'm the government, the call obviously was not ended.
Right.
The call was not ended. Now, if she thought it was ended, that doesn't mean it was. She was still on the phone and still talking and being recorded. And she agreed to be recorded when she dialed the number and kept talking and using the phone. She waived any privilege.
AC saying that she thinks Wendy is still in Miami, which is contrary to what I've heard. So AC, please email me, survivingthesurvivor@gmail. It goes to all of us behind the scenes. I would love to hear more about that. Also, mods, if possible, can we put the link up for justice for Dan Markel? Jared Ross popped in on the earlier show, and there are people behind the scenes who do a lot of work, and he's one of them. So I just want people to be aware.
So, Joe, let me give you an example. Law school exam. You're on the phone talking to your spouse. and the spouse in jail gets pissed off and hangs up. But the other person keeps talking and says, yeah, I hid the gun. I did. I got rid of the gun. No worries. Would that be admissible?
Yeah, I think so. The Fourth Amendment protection here says you have to have a personal expectation of privacy, and then it has to be something that society thinks is reasonable. I don't see how that latter prong can be met, that we would think it as a societal matter, it's reasonable to give you that protection when you're talking to somebody in jail and it's being recorded, and then you don't take the care to be sure that you hang up. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I don't either. This is interesting. Christy Wolf, Joel, she's in Austin, Texas. We're talking about Wendy. Now we have people here who have seen her. Ned Smith, who's a character with her, I always say it's a knitting needle. And I always say sewing. What's the difference? I have no idea. I checked the Travis County Appraisal District Monthly. This is amazing. This is why I say best guess, better community. Like, she's a retired court reporter, Ned Smith. So she's in her world there. That's interesting. Ned, if that changes, you know where to find me. And Vesper Martini, on top of everything, always back to Stephon Stearns for a minute. He's filed a motion to continue the trial on the SA case. And I guess that's what's being heard tomorrow. We're going to try to bring it to you live, but either way, we're going to do a show tomorrow night, catching up on Maddie Soto. And there was a little breaking news in between our 2:30 and now. The Menendez brothers now officially have a court date, and it's 2 days, March 20th and 21st, where they're going to find out about this sort of special request to let them out and basically sort of, I don't know what the technical term is, but, free them. How about that? That's a technical term. They will emancipate the brothers or not. They're going to find out their fate on March 20th and 21st. So that's interesting. So we're going on here with the this motion, and you see at the beginning, at the bottom here, the highlighted part, the beginning of the call, an automated voice notifies the recipient of the call that the call will be recorded and is not a private call. I mean, Tim, is that part just enough? Is that something that with Sarah Dugan today, that either she or Georgia are just going to say, look, it says at the beginning, these are not private calls. Too bad that she stayed on long.
Yeah, she stayed on too long. I don't see this motion having any merit. When you're told the call is being recorded and you don't hang up properly and it catches you saying something you don't want to say, it's hard for you to complain, oh, where's my privacy? I don't think this is going anywhere.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's take a walk down memory lane. Look what the COE pulled up. She pulled up the call, which we haven't listened to in a long time. So let's listen to this.
Hey, Joel, I got a good source that says that Wendy is in Austin with her boyfriend and the boys, and they're rented in a house. Her boyfriend's name is George, and the boys go to Austin JCC.
And there you go. Tim's sources. Interesting. Tim, someone asked earlier in the chat. Now I'm going to drag you into the Wendy conversation. But do you think not are they going to arrest her? But do you think that they have eyes on her in case, that they're keeping an eye on her?
I think right now they have all their attention on Donna, and I think they're really having to look at this Donna case, make sure they get a conviction. Look at these issues. Now they're running around making sure she. Right now, I'm sure Georgia or somebody else is at the jail looking for all the time she's asked for medical and didn't get it. She probably got the head of the jail, head of the medical, everybody they can to present evidence at this hearing to make sure she doesn't get out of jail. I'm sure they're worried about her fleeing. I'm sure worried about her not showing up for court. So I don't think Wendy's in their forefront right now.
Yeah. Ned, you're now our Austin correspondent. Get over there. Please confront her on camera and we'll take you live. It'd be great. It'll be great YouTube. Thank you for offering. Love STS. Thank you so much. By the way, if you like this and you appreciate the content, please hit that like button. Please subscribe. Please consider joining Patreon. It goes a very long way. And by the way, you guys are an awesome community. We're at the point where we need a show sponsor. If you happen to know someone that's interested in sponsoring STS, please let us know. survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com. It takes a village. So, and I like to include everybody in everything, including that. Here is the call, the jailhouse call, just to set this up. This is literally right after Charlie's conviction, November 6, 2023, maybe a day later. They're talking, and then she doesn't realize that good old Charlie hung up, and she continues to talk. So let's take a listen.
And this is from Pretty Lies and Alibis, our friend Gigi.
Nice.
And COE, how long is this? Because it says 25 minutes, not that long call, but I'll let you play it.
This is a prepaid collect call from an incarcerated individual at the Leon County Jail. This call is not private. It will be recorded and may be monitored. If you believe this should be a private call, please hang up and follow facility instructions to register this number as a private number.
Please hang up.
Charges and consent to this recorded call, press 1.
Consented.
Thank you for using Securus. You may start the conversation now.
It drops off after 8 minutes.
Yeah.
No.
What's the COE doing here?
And it's a total of a 25.5-minute call.
When I have something that I do need to tell you, I'll speak to Dan. Okay? So, then I'll let you know what time to call him. Can you hear me, Charlie? Shit. You can't hear me again, right? Charlie, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Still playing. It's still playing. Where are the new Donna calls? COE, is this still playing, or is Fred showing? Okay, there we go.
That they cut the line each time. Have to pay for every minute, but they keep charging every time you reconnect. They say that doesn't happen. Listen, it's that he's in this room that. So the psychologist, they want to make sure he doesn't kill himself. So the psychologist finally came, and he said to her, "If you leave me here, I'll kill myself. There's no light, no nothing. I'm in a cement block. Let me go back to myself and see where I am. Please don't leave me here." And spoke to him for a little bit, and she said, "No, you're perfectly fine. I know that. I just have to go back and, I've got a few of these reports I have to write. Once I get those written and then submit them and then get them approved, you'll be able to go back." So he thought he was going back in an hour, but
He was in solitary confinement.
I think I'll lose my mind in here. It's just all spirit on the inside. So all you see is yourself. The lights never shut off, day or night. These fluorescent lights, he says, are on all night. He said, "I just want to go back where I was. At least I know people. I can see people." He says, "Here, I'm in a box." So he's just. What?
She's talking to two friends of
I'm
hers
sure he'll pull back or just keep
who are there.
I didn't even know if they were drinking. They must have been Coke, ordered nothing. So I because we're in a very, I think, very tight time. Because I don't want to do what I want to do, but it's not ready. I think would be a nice way to just leave me alone and say goodbye. I am not your myself. Go to prison. He didn't do. I can't push it. I'm not that strong. And I also know how he, in a year and a half, his body and everything has slowly started to deteriorate. I'm old. I have a life. We had a great marriage. Happy. We traveled. We lived good. I really am not unhappy. And I'm more than willing to just say goodbye and let me lie down and painful. I just want to go to sleep. We bought our cemetery property a couple of months ago. We're good. I'm good. What Wendy did this weekend, because I said something that made her feel like I had enough, and I'm not going to watch. If the trial doesn't go well, I know what I need to do. Now, you know something was wrong because we lived here 9 years. Yeah. She's never once just come over and said, I need to talk to you. I'm sure. Sexual she sat down on the couch right there. I was sitting here, and she didn't say, "Look, Mom, this is a horrible time for all of us. Charlie's on trial for his life. We're all aggravated, but if this is what you're thinking, just sat there. And she said, "Listen, you're suicidal. I'm going to vaporex you." So I said, "I'm not suicidal. I'm fine. Will we see the boys tomorrow night?" Yeah, Sunday night. Yeah. Great. Now, am I suicidal? No. Do I want to go to sleep and not see my son? I do. Perfectly honest, I do. And we'll do it together. We'll do it together. Leave a note. They'll know when to come and get us. And we'll do it together. The boy. Look, got to make a decision at some point. So after speaking to Dan this morning and knowing what they're thinking up there, I don't know if we'll make it out in time. I really don't. But Dan said, you might, or you might do all of it, get to the airport, and they'll stop. And that could happen.
Hey, COE, can we hold it there? Yeah. So you hear her referring to Dan there, and that is, everyone believes, Dan Rashbaum, her attorney, well, Charlie's attorney at the time, who was, and it's important because he was his attorney, but according to this call, it sounds like he was giving information or advice to Donna about potentially fleeing. Now, I forgot my own interview because I have like ADHD, but Tim did remind me that, he basically chalked it up to the fact that she's an innocent woman at that point. She's not incarcerated. She has not been arrested. She's free to do whatever she wants. Tim, I'll never, ever, 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 ever understand how people with money that they did have, probably don't have much left, why they would buy a one-way ticket. Because any jurors hearing this, if you said they had a round-trip ticket, they would say, well, maybe they were just super stressed and wanted, I would think that maybe they just wanted to get away. Who knows? But that one-way ticket, Tim, in my opinion, that is their death knell. What do you say?
Well, I think the evidence is going to show that, one, she didn't even pay for the tickets. They used a third party to buy the tickets to alleviate suspicion that it was a one-way ticket. And the only reason evidence they have is she had to do the visas herself. And we saw the emails, how frantic she was, how she had to get them, and she wanted them within 24 hours. So I think everything clearly shows they were fleeing to avoid prosecution. And that's when you get the instruction, consciousness of guilt, which is so damaging that a judge is going to read a jury instruction that you can infer guilt from her fleeing to avoid prosecution.
Guilty. I mean, I don't know how a jury sees this on any other way unless this gets suppressed. You see here again, we just heard it. The call will be recorded. It is not a private call. It states that explicitly at the beginning. Now the argument's going to be over did she know he hung up? At 8 minutes and 5 seconds in the call, Miss Adelson realizes that Charlie Adelson is no longer on the phone. At that point, Miss Adelson reasonably believed the call, according to her defense attorneys, had ended, and she puts the phone down. At this time, and here are the people, with her husband. She's there with her husband, attorney Sue Brotman, and Miss Brotman's husband, Richard Chagrin, who I'm sure Steve reached out to these people, and I'm sure that they will never ever talk. But again, Tim, what's the deal with? I mean, Susan Brotman is an attorney. I'm not sure if the husband is, but are they going to be called potentially?
Well, she wasn't, unless she was her attorney, and unless she was giving legal advice, it's not privilege. If Richard's not an attorney, then it's not privilege, because anytime a third party hears it, that voids the attorney privilege.
Harvey
So-
was there too.
And
Yeah, Harvey was.
but he has husband-wife privilege,
Yeah.
right? So if Mr. Brotman is not an attorney, all this would come in, and they can subpoena Mr. Brotman. Now, whether he remembers or recalls it, we'll see. But I think there is ample other evidence
I do
that
too.
this call is not necessary to prove
Right.
she was fleeing.
Bluebird, I have to agree with you. I'm not going to go into this now because Tim is going to laugh at me, but I do think that they are going to go
They
after
might.
Wendy, and that's because I think Georgia is a fierce competitor, and I think it's personal, and I feel like Wendy thinks she's out of the proverbial woods. So we're going to see how that plays out. Discussion of law. This is literally for Joe Potuto. Discussion of law. It goes without saying that inmates have a diminished expectation of privacy, and aside from calls with attorneys, their calls can be recorded.
That's
Same is
true.
true for anyone who accepts a call
Yep.
from an inmate for the duration of that telephone call. So what does this mean, Joe?
Well, it means you don't need a warrant, and it means that it doesn't. There are two lines under the Fourth Amendment. There are some things where you need a warrant. If you don't get a warrant, then you have to show some acceptable reason why you didn't have to get a warrant. Consent is one, emergency might be another. But then there's another line that says you don't need a warrant in the first place, and that's this line. You don't need a warrant because they've got in prison no expectation of privacy here.
Why is this in the states? I mean, I'm sorry, in the defense motion here. They're just
Because
they're
they've got to
pound it.
acknowledge it. Well,
Yeah.
they have to ignore. They can't go in and say, against all the law, there is an expectation of privacy here. They got to start the argument somewhere, and they're going to start conceding two things that they might as well concede because they're absolutely clear and incontrovertible.
So Joel, when you file a motion with the court, you have an ethical duty to submit adverse case law or
Mhm.
adverse principle law that's not case law, but adverse law that's everybody knows. And
did not
you
know
saw
that.
you saw that originally the first day Donna got arrested, right? Her lawyer from South Florida came in there and was citing some law and there was adverse case law when they were trying to depose the parents, Harvey and Donna. And she was trying to protect them. And the judge says, you know that you had adverse case law. You didn't be careful before you say another word before this court. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And so she quickly shut up and didn't say anymore because the judges don't like when you don't give them adverse case law. You have an obligation as an attorney to be candid with the court.
I never knew that. That's fascinating. And obviously very important. Tim, let's look at this. It's well established under Florida law that for an oral conversation to be protected under section blah blah blah, speaker must have an actual subjective expectation of privacy. And then you go to 19 here toward the end, but I'll read the whole thing. In other words, there must be both a subjective, reasonable expectation of privacy as well as an objective, reasonable expectation of privacy that society is ready to recognize. It is also well established under Florida law, this is important, that an individual loses that reasonable expectation of privacy when they commit criminal or otherwise unlawful acts. But now, Joe, this is a fine line. There's a professor issue here. She's not convicted. So
No, that doesn't. That's that in there, and that I don't think that really refers to her. It's the first part. And notice when they made the argument earlier, they said she had a reasonable expectation of privacy. I'm not sure it was reasonable, but give her that. The part that kills her is whether it's the kind of expectation of privacy the rest of us are willing to acknowledge society should let her have. And that's the part that I just don't see. Plus, the law here if it really were the kind of government activity where a warrant was needed, then it would be up to the prosecution to have the burden to say, in this case, it's constitutional. I happen to think there's a pretty good argument that the burden should be on the defense here. I don't think the judge would do it, but if I were the prosecution, I'd make a short little argument that we're going to take on the burden because it's so clear, but we don't think it's our burden because there was never a need to get a warrant in the first place.
By the way, Tim from Leo Wren, Susan Brotman, the way I understood it, was just a friend, not hired or retained by Donna, but Leo's asking if Susan is an attorney. Is there some expectation of attorney-client privilege? Only if she was retained by Donna, right?
No, you don't have to be retained. That's a misnomer.
Okay.
All you have to do, if people come up to me and ask me a question and they say, hey, can I ask you a question, a legal question? And they ask me something and I'm not getting paid and they tell me something, that's a legal opinion. And that would be covered by privilege because they believe they're speaking to an attorney. That's privilege. And sometimes says, hey, this is privilege, right? And I said, yeah, it's privilege. You don't have to be paid.
By the way, Wesley John Holmes, my brother from another mother who I've never met, who's in Tokyo via Australia. Donna's going to need 12 jurors in a coma for any type of acquittal, and that ain't going to happen. It's still on. I'm not sure what the trial is still on. Yes, but Tallahassee, we've talked about it before, is the most educated, contrary to Donna Adelson's understanding, the most educated city in all of Florida. It is the capital, and they're going to have a jury panel that understands what's going on.
Thank you, Judy.
Yeah, there you go. Great point, Tim. We discussed this ad nauseum in ethics CLEs. The question here, I'd love to see Judy and Tim studying for a logs. Tim would be cheating off of Judy. I know it. Tim would be like the entire time.
That's not ethical.
Yeah. Then Tim goes out and makes $500 million.
I am not taking another law exam. No.
Yeah, ever. The question here is whether the consent the recipient of the call gives for the call to be recorded terminates when the inmate side of the call ends. What a sentence. Typically, when two people are on the phone having a conversation where at least one of the parties is using a cellular phone and one end of the call drops, the call terminates. So here, Joe Potuto, I don't know. They're just getting
I would say, so what? It didn't happen here. I mean, they're using, as I said, they're finding case law that doesn't relate to this situation. There's law that says when you consent, you control the scope of the consent. So I can say to you, you can come in my house, you can search the kitchen, but not the bedroom. Or I can say you can come into my house, but you only have an hour. I'm controlling the scope of the consent. They're using those cases to say that's what happened here. But that's not what happened here. She consented. She never stated a scope. The consent was until she stopped talking. When the phone call was over, and this phone call, the recording was still on. There was no other cases that they looked at where the police were the ones who were controlling the recording. Here, that didn't happen. This is a recording that went on automatically. There was no officer saying, aha, she's still talking. She thinks the recording is over. Let's listen. I'm not even sure that would be enough, but that's not these facts.
I agree. Tay, by the way, says all these motions are going to be denied. Ida Shaw, Tim, if you're required to take one, if you want to take the bar again, Tim, you should go to California. They've cut it from 3 days. Tim, in all seriousness, if you took the bar today, right now, would you pass or fail? What do you think?
Well, it depends which bar exam. California, Florida, they keep it specific to the state. Now, Florida, of course, I would pass. California, unless I did some, I don't really know. I haven't looked at White Acre and Black Acre in a long time, or the rules against perpetuities, So I think really that we should the criminal section.
I think that we should get a camera and have Professor Potuto be. What do you call the person who supervises an exam? What's that person?
A monitor.
Monitor. Yeah, we'll have Joe Potuto be the monitor, and we will live stream Tim sweating, taking the Florida bar, and we will see if he passes or not. What a great live
Don't
stream
take
that would
me
be.
back to that time period. I got post-traumatic stress from it.
That would be amazing.
That was 38 years ago.
Wow. And
I
Tim, you
mean,
don't
you
look a day
didn't
over
love
39.
your law school experience? You
I'm
didn't
sorry?
revel, you didn't love your law school experience? You didn't embrace every second of it?
I reveled at, we had law school football. We had law school basketball. We had Thursday nights at Bennigan's where the med school and the law students
Bennigan's.
would get together.
Yeah.
And then it was football games on Saturday.
Wow. If you never heard of Bennigan's, it means you're over the age or under the age of like 45. But Bennigan's was, man, that was a spot at one point. Donna's medical care needs. This is now on to the whole bond issue that they want Donna out of jail. Mrs. Adelson needs medical care that simply cannot be obtained at the detention facility. She needs an appointment with an ear, nose, and throat specialist. Again, ironic since that's what her estranged son does. An orthopedist as well. I need an orthopedist for my neck. I won't talk about it anymore. And a physical therapist. I need that as well for my neck. I won't talk about it anymore. At a minimum, if she remains incarcerated pending trial, the defense will need to prepare motions to seek permission for Mrs. Adelson to receive the care outside of Leon County Detention Center, obtain a court. I mean, Tim, this is something that probably everyone tries, whether you're 75 or 25. And the reality is, like you said, there are jail nurses. They do get, not obviously the best health care going, but they get health care. And if it was something serious, a la Harvey Weinstein, even P. Diddy, they sent him to jail. To hospital the other day under kind of the cover of night. But if something was really wrong with her, they would get her the medical care, right?
Absolutely. They would send her to a hospital. They would take her to a private doctor. I've had clients that had to get like teeth pulled out. They do it with an escort. She would pay for that escort if you can afford it. They're going to make sure she gets, if it's important, they're going to get it to her. Now she's older, and some of this stuff I don't think is an emergency. It's just part of getting old. Unfortunately, we all get there. We all have backaches sometimes. We all have earaches sometimes. But yeah, she's not going to get the same treatment she's going to get in her community. But she's charged with first-degree murder. So if she's innocent, jury will tell her. If she's not, she's in the place she should be.
By the way, COE Sperry Talley, a new name. Welcome. She is suggesting, or he, kinetic tape for my neck. I'm going straight to CVS after this. I now have like 17 neck pillows, a neck stretcher, a chiropractic device. None of it is helping, but we'll continue to work on it. Wesley John Holmes, this may be a time to either tune out or stop eating breakfast because it's coming your way right now. Miss Adelson was bent over, brushing her teeth with her right hand and leaning on the sink with her left hand. All of a sudden, this is a different one. All of a sudden, she felt her left arm being jerked violently behind and up her back. As she was yanked in that direction, a much larger inmate told her that she knew Miss Adelson got canteen and that from now on, she was going to get canteen for her too. When Mrs. Adelson tried to ask why she would do that, she was told by the large inmate that she was going to do it. Mrs. Adelson was scared for her life and what more physical harm would come if she didn't comply. From that point forward, this aggressive inmate has instructed Mrs. Adelson what canteen packages she wanted ordered on a weekly basis. Afraid for her life, Mrs. Adelson began telling her husband to order the packages each week. The irony here, Tim Janssen, this is a modicum, a type of extortion here, and that was their whole defense theory. This sort of thing happens in jail. Do you believe this story? I mean, I got to ask you.
Well, let me say this. Unless Harvey went to the jail and actually had this conversation, which would have been recorded, they should be able to record the conversation between her and Harvey and see if she ever mentioned or told him to give canteen money to this woman. Then it's a lie.
This motion says she never told Harvey because she didn't want him to know So she
Oh,
ordered the extra set of canteen food, and he thought he was
oh,
getting it for her.
okay. I
Mm.
stand corrected then.
Yeah,
Okay.
so you're
Yeah.
not going to be, yeah. So you're not going to, so that avenue of disproving is shut down.
Yeah.
Look at this. She had to ruin my night. Sheila, neck pain can mean heart issues. Why are you talking about your neck? I don't know, because I like to talk about things. Please get checked, Joel. COE, we will be at urgent care or the hospital tonight getting every test on earth performed. It never ends. Okay, so this again is the defense trying to get yes, this is true.
I like the COE's
also-
comment, Joel.
Yeah. By the way, ask our middle child if she can spell hypochondriac. She should be able to. She can spell arachnophobia. That's why
She can
So,
recognize one.
yeah. One of the first acts of physical abuse by another inmate took place while Mrs. Adelson was showering. This is it, John Wesley Holmes.
John Wesley.
Wesley John Holmes. Did I say? I said it wrong. Miss Adelson was showering and was of a sexual nature. She thought she was alone in the area while she was showering, when all of a sudden she felt another inmate run her hand up her entire spine from just above her buttocks to the area of her neck. The inmate asked Mrs. Adelson if she liked it, and in response, Mrs. Adelson, very frightened, began to scream with I mean, this, which caused the aggressor. We're not laughing at the assault. We're laughing at the imagery. Caused the aggressor / inmate to leave the area. Mrs. Adelson did all she could to avoid this woman during the remainder of that inmate's incarceration at Leon County Detention Center. Now, again, Tim, this happened apparently. At least one of these happened a while back. Do you think if this happened on a particular day, wouldn't she have gone and talked on that day? I cannot see her bottling this up. Can you?
I think she would have at least told her attorney. Her attorney might have, asked for a transfer of some kind. Now, do I think that someone, another bigger inmate, asked to get canteen? Absolutely.
Right.
Do I think an inmate came up to her and maybe she thought she was flirting with her and nice to her and she wanted to get a little action? Maybe, but they can't protect them from everything. And she should have reported it. But you know what happens if you report it, then things get worse.
This is interesting from AA Legal Focus. It's not credible because it too closely mirrors the whole phony extra. I agree. I mean, that's the first thing I thought of, AA. So interesting. Carm telling me to cut it out, of course. Carm told me if I get they told me I might need a shot, and Carm is swearing to me that if I get a shot and I end up in a wheelchair, she's not helping me and she's going to wheel me off a building or something. So, yeah, Mount Sinai is a good hospital, no doubt. I live near it. Carm telling me to shut up. This is a great idea. I would love to do this, actually. STS Joel's internal dialogue. I would like to just
It won't
rant.
be internal anymore.
No, it won't. You're right. It won't, but I would love to just rant. I'm going to get so many messages today. I really like your show, except for when you digress and start talking about your neck. Why do you do that? And then I'm going to want us write back an angry message, and the COE is going to have to talk me down. Donna reported February 7th. There are no reports of SA prior to that. Okay, so there's been some conflicting, I guess, talk about the actual time it happened, but there are now a few more cases of quote unquote assault that we knew of previously. Most recently, as Donna threatened near her bunk bed. Most recently, as Mrs. Adelson was standing in the area of and facing her bunk bed, another inmate slammed into her from behind, knocking Mrs. Adelson into the frame of the bed. That would hurt. This was very painful to Mrs. Adelson. When she turned around and asked why the woman had done that, the inmate replied, "Because you're an effing killer." Tim, jail ain't a friendly place.
That could happen.
That could definitely happen.
Definitely
do you think
happen.
it happened? Yeah.
Especially if she didn't give canteen money to somebody.
Yes. Remind me never to go to jail or prison. I mean, Joe, I got to take a step back here, Joe. I mean, when you think about this, it's a woman who's now 75 years old. She was so intent on having her grandchildren not live in Tallahassee that she, orchestrated this murder for hire. I don't even know what I'm asking here other than why can't people, I don't know, understand repercussions? Now she's in jail. Now she's getting beat up. Now she's having issues with her ear canals. Now people are touching her behind. If she just dealt with it, by helping Wendy to get a divorce, this wouldn't be going on. I mean,
Yeah,
I know you study the
yeah.
law, but what about people? Why does this always happen?
Well, I mean, it doesn't always happen. We see the cases in which it does, but think of
True.
all the people who have gotten divorces, even gone through messy custody hearings, who
True.
haven't gotten out and murdered a spouse. I don't know. I used to think that in closing arguments, prosecutors should be able to say, does this seem crazy to you? Does this seem unreasonable to you? Well, let me tell you, this is a signature characteristic of being a criminal and getting caught. Many of them do not appreciate the consequences from Act 1 to Act 2. That's why, in part, when police go up in a traffic situation to a car, it's one of the most dangerous things they can do, because you have cases, and I can't tell you how many cases I used to see in my criminal law book, where the person in the car is maybe has a parole violation or something. So his solution is to shoot and kill the officer in order to avoid the silly thing. How many people burglarize the house next door, and once they're inside, think to themselves, oh my God, now I've got to kill these people because they can recognize me. This inability to evaluate what's going to happen next and to measure the consequences seems to be, a problem, or at least an MO of a lot of people who commit crime.
Yeah, and Alice Ryder-Feld, she's an attorney here in Miami. She says she's a sociopath, even though she's a lawyer. I like the diagnosis. I would tend to agree. Here we go, and then I'm going to get to this comment for Tim. Mrs. Adelson is a 75-year-old woman with physical impediments. By the way, Carm's 85, and Carm is she just got a clean bill of health from her doctor. Carm's pretty sturdy. Miss Adelson is a 75-year-old woman with physical impediments, with no prior criminal history, no disciplinary issues during her entire incarceration at the Leon County Detention Center for the past 14 months. There are no allegations that she personally engaged in any conduct herself that resulted in any harm to anyone, including
what
Mr.
kind of statement is that? There's no allegation. It's called an indictment.
Yeah,
she's saying didn't personally do it. I mean, what they're saying there, they only hired
now,
it.
Joe, now you sound like a law professor, because now we're parsing the word.
Yeah.
I agree with Tim. It's ridiculous, but that's the wording.
Yeah, but Tim, why would you ever put this in a motion? Why? It's
you would not,
right?
Because you're grasping at straws,
right?
Yeah,
right.
But is this the kind of thing that Everett could bring up? Why did you, kind of get reprimanded for this?
It's like saying John Gotti never physically killed anybody, but he hired a hitman to kill him, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly insulting to, Phil and Ruth and Shelley.
Tell me on the facts. Didn't she have an episode with a spoon? Was it a spoon that she didn't want to return and was written up because of it? Is that not a disciplinary issue?
It would be, because that would have been contraband that she was in her cell and could be turned into a weapon. So they don't let you have a spoon.
People are calling her desperate. Donna, Tim, what would you do in this case? I mean, in your heart of hearts, you know that if this Vietnam stuff comes in and a bunch of, the bump man and all this other stuff, is it likely her attorney advised her that this case is a losing one? Is that something you have that conversation?
No. She's not going to have that conversation with her. The only time you have a conversation like that is when you're working out a plea deal, and there is no plea deal. So it's ride or fly, right? You're going to ride this out, you're going to fly home, or you're going to spend the rest of your life. And I don't know how the lawyer's getting paid, but she's not going to tell her you're losing. It's a lost cause because there'd be no confidence with the client and the lawyer. And she might need her to have confidence if she's going to testify.
By the way, True Lifestyles, not true about the no infractions. She used the washing machine in this one too. Susan brought to our attention a while back during a tornado watch.
I only remembered the spoon, so thank you.
Was a level 4 incident. I always want to do my laundry during a tornado watch. A spork or a spoon. Black Widow laughing at the word spork, even though I can't understand half the things Black Widow says because she comes to us from the Republic of Ireland.
You know what a spork is, right?
Yeah, a spoon and a fork combined.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do that. Glenn Thomas, I saw your comment earlier. Thank you very much. Actually giving me a bit of support where I get made fun of from a lot of other people, but I appreciate that. I remember the spoon thing. She was trying to keep it LMAO after the 2 months of having to eat her food with her hands like a raccoon. Can someone please put Donna's head on a raccoon eating and send that to me, please? I mean, you got to have some kind of humor with this or you will not survive. That's what Carm said about the Holocaust. That's what I say about true crime. There's got to be some element of humor, just too insane otherwise. Not a flight risk. Joe Potuto, Mrs. Adelson has no passport and has been placed on a no-flight list and thus cannot schedule a flight bound for any domestic or foreign destination. Her husband is 80 years old and would relocate to live with Mrs. Adelson in Tallahassee, Florida, from release through trial. Joe Potuto, and we'll go to Tim on this. I mean, she says Tallahassee. In Miami, I can be on a boat in like 7 minutes.
You can be on a boat. You can hire a private plane to get out. I mean, if you have money, there are ways to get out of the country.
Yeah. By the way, this is the arrest video. But Tim, I mean, is that ever going to fly? She doesn't have a, she doesn't have a passport. Wow. But she does have millions.
You cannot, in good faith, as an attorney, put that in your motion, knowing that she was caught fleeing the jurisdiction, going to Vietnam with no extradition. How can you say she's not a flight risk? You can't. Not with the straight face, right? You can't say it with the straight face.
Well, look at her here versus her recent, jail pictures.
When they file this stuff, Joel, the judge reads it. You lose credibility really quick.
That's what I would think.
Really quick when you say something that is obviously it's embarrassing. You lose credibility.
That does not surprise me
Tim, how
at
much
all.
do you think they're responding to her pushing? She wants out and she's pushing, and they just exceed it. And how much is them covering, making every,
That's right. That's probably what's happening.
Yeah.
That's probably 100%. She wants the motion filed. They're documenting everything. And she probably said, we're probably not going to get it, but we'll file it. They'll file a bunch of motions, like the motion to suppress. We'll file it just so we're not ineffective counsel. The chances of you winning this are not good, but we'll file it.
Yeah. What troubles me, though, is if you're going to file a motion as a lawyer, I think you should do it as well as it can be done. And
I agree.
I didn't think these were done that way.
You should never have grammatical and spelling errors in a motion.
There you are. You're on my side here.
In a high-profile case like this, you got two lawyers. One can read it, another can read it. Bring in a paralegal. Bring in someone else to read it just for grammatical.
Bring in my 9-year-old. She can spell really well. And I agree with you. I mean, there are computers these days that are supposed to catch those mistakes. I mean, the other thing is probably one of the most eloquent judges out there is Judge Everett. Like, he has such a command of the English language and the way he turns phrases that he's going to be shaking his head. But Dr. Reinhardt here, how many motions, Tim, can Donna's attorneys file? June is 4 months away. I mean, can they file 400 motions? Is there some sort of
there's a deadline?
But is there some sort of unstated rule where
No, you can file as many motions. You're supposed to be in good faith. The motion should be made in good faith. You confer with the opposition. You try to work things out. Usually a motion, you have to contact the state and get their position on it. So the lawyers don't want paper document cases. And some lawyers file a lot of motions depending on the case. You got a first-degree murder case. So they're going to file everything they think they have to cover themselves should they lose.
Shout out to Tara Ellis for this. Joe, instead of doing this to Tim, I'm going to do this to you this time. Jackie St. Germain. Wendy's going to get arrested only after Donna gets convicted. No way Charlie will sit quietly in prison in South Dakota where the current temperature is minus 387 degrees Fahrenheit and he's shaking like a leaf and let Wendy live her life as a free woman. I tend to agree. I think that when things go south, families start to cannibalize each other. And in those jailhouse calls, you already hear the two of them. And this is well over a year ago, talking about how they are not too fond of Wendy at the moment. That has only grown exponentially while the two of them sit behind bars. So what do you think? Do you think that Charlie could ever flip?
I don't know which way his ego would push him. I don't think he'll do anything while he's got appeals or a post-conviction motion ahead of him that he thinks might be successful, because unless he gets some deal out of the prosecution that will reduce his exposure to prison. But I think, and I'm not sure they would do it, but I think if once everything is final and he's sitting in prison and she's out free, I wouldn't be surprised if he did it not for a deal, but just to get his own back. Here I am sitting here. It was your husband. It was for you that we did it. You don't visit. You don't talk to me. You're out having a high life. I can certainly imagine him deciding that he was going to do his best to have her live the life that he's leading.
This is a phone log, December to February, updated this week. Duration of minutes, 10,273 and 77, I guess. I don't know what that is. Seconds, but isn't 60 seconds a minute? I don't know what we're looking at here. December to February, 171 hours spent on the phone. Tim, I mean, is that what these inmates do all day? Just talk on the phone ad nauseum?
No, because they don't have the money to do that. They're watching videos. No, they're not doing that. That's for sure. They don't have the money to do that. They're lucky they get canteen, right?
Yeah.
Which
I
is
love
the
this.
other thing about this motion. She says when she was in the pod, all she was doing was, it was dark and she'd be in bed between meals and do nothing else. She says in isolation, she has nothing except when she can get out for an hour and then she can walk a little or use the TV. And it absolutely misstates with easy documentation. So again, I do not understand why these motions are done the way they're done.
She's got a tablet, so she can watch movies. She can listen to her music. She can call her husband.
But that's not what she says in the motion.
Right.
Look at this. The princess. This is a great comment. The karmic justice of both Harvey and Donna now willing to relocate to Tallahassee. If this is not lost on y'all, that was the point of the homicide or part of it. Man, that is a full circle moment. I'm glad you commented in that way because it really ties it all together. In 15 minutes and change, we are doing the third show of the day, despite my neck and possible heart issue, according to Sheila. And we're going to be talking about the Kentucky sheriff who on camera murdered Judge Kevin Mullins, even though it's still an alleged murder until he's, convicted. But we've got Hillbilly Crime. Elizabeth Jones is the host of that show, coming on with two other great guests. That story is incredibly interesting. In a small rural county in Kentucky, again, Sheriff Mickey Steins murdering a judge, and what's really going on is the real story. We're going to be doing that at 7. If you don't know that story, you're definitely going to want to check it out. And I think there's going to be an automatic redirect here. So I am going to begin to wrap this by going to Tim Janssen. So Tim, you were in court today. The next hearing again is February 26th, I believe. And I do think that's going to be a 2 to 3 hour hearing with Donna present via Zoom. What do you think we should expect in that particular hearing upcoming?
So let me just give you some information that I'm getting. So Sue and Rick that were there, Sue, the lawyer, is a real estate lawyer working on wills and trusts. Her husband, Rick, is rumored to be in the liquor sales distribution. Sue may be called to testify. The witness, Scott Radius, who was in the Philippines and got a call from the Adelsons, is a former cop. So a lawyer and a former cop may be called to testify against the Adelsons.
That's interesting.
So,
yeah,
it's curious. I wait to see the final witness list. That'll be interesting.
By the way, Glenn is a brave person because he's in here fighting with everyone, saying that Wendy is 100% innocent. Glenn may in fact be Wendy, or Glenn might be George, but Glenn might also just be Glenn. You don't know, but everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Ida Shaw, JD here, justice for Dan Markell, coming from an attorney herself saying that, and time is going to, play itself out here, and we're going to see how all of this does come to fruition at the end. But Joe Potuto, the trial, someone said, is I think 118 days away. Is there any chance, in your opinion, that this just never goes to trial, that something happens, either Donna makes some sort of deal or something else out of left field?
In this world, there's always a chance that something extremely unusual could happen. But I don't see it as any kind of realistic possibility that she would turn on Wendy. I mean, there's nobody else she could give. It'd have to be either turning on Wendy or turning on Harvey. There's nobody else out there that we know of. And I cannot see her turning against Harvey. And I don't think, even if someday she might be willing to turn against Wendy, that the time is yet, although who knows if she's miserable enough in jail. I don't think so, but nothing is impossible in this world.
Yeah. Tim and Joe are the best guests. I have to agree there. Wesley John Holmes says Radius gets called for sure. And then this is the one, Justice for Dan Markell. That's what this is all about. Again, we talk about true crime kind of flippantly as like it's, I don't know, like a soap opera, but these are real people's lives. And, I talk to Ruth often. I talk to Phil, Shelly. I communicate through them. This weighs really heavily on them, obviously. And every time they see something or read something, even about the comment in that motion about taking a shot that she's not even responsible for Dan's murder, I know that pains them. So I don't know. I don't want to get on a high horse, but I'm just saying, I guess we should think about that. Also, just think about the insanity that this case really is. When you take a step back, that this woman, Donna Adelson, thought she was going to solve things by literally murdering her son-in-law, who happened to be an incredibly bright mind. So just doesn't make sense. On that cheerful note, we're going to be back here in 12 minutes discussing the Kentucky thing. Tomorrow, hate to mention the neck again, but I'm going to I have to go to see someone on that. And so if Stephon Stearns is in court, I'm sure the COE is going to have that live, but then we're going to do a Maddie Soto kind of update show tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Until then.
Now you're talking about a real monster.
Yeah, that's a real monster. We'll get Joe on that as well, and Tim. For now, love you, America. Love you, Jersey. Love you, Tallahassee. We'll see you in, 11 minutes. And justice for Dan Markell. Don't forget to like and subscribe.